My name is Sam DeMello. I am the CEO and founder of Evive, which is a digital health platform for gambling. And personally, I'm in recovery from a gambling addiction. I've been in recovery for about 6 years. I'm 38 years old, and I think I have a pretty common story for men my age in the United States. I started gambling when I was 12, when I saw Chris Moneymaker win the World Series of Poker on ESPN. In a lot of ways, gambling was the first thing that I ever did that was cool in the eyes of my friends. I'm about 5'6". I wasn't really dominating out there on the basketball court, but I was always really good at cards. And, when I started gambling, it really was the first time that I felt like one of the guys. And when I started gambling, I had no concept of, gambling addiction or gambling related harm. My parents sat down, they talked to me about sex and drugs and rock and roll, but they never talked to me about gambling. And I think the way that they saw it was, instead of me being out running around town, maybe drinking or doing anything like that, I was in the basement, losing 10 or 20 bucks. What was the worst thing that could happen? And, from the moment that I started playing poker, I got really into it. And, I continued to play through high school and in college. I got more serious about it. I found guys, in the dorm rooms that wanted to play every night like I did. And when I turned 18, I was able to finally gamble in a casino. And, pretty much immediately, I saw my lack of being able to set a limit on either time or money. What started as maybe we'll drive to the casino on Saturday nights once or twice a month turned into Friday and Saturday and Sunday, turned into during the school week. And pretty soon, I spent more time in my college career sitting around a smoking, a smoky poker table than I did in class. But through all of that time, I was only gambling in person. And if I spent too much money at the casino or I needed to stay away, there was this natural barrier between me and my ability to gamble. I had to have the money and I had to physically be there. And, I graduated college, I moved out of the country for a couple years. And when I moved back to the States, I was about 23 years old. And that's when I got introduced to sports betting. And I think more consequentially for me and my gambling, it's when I got introduced to gambling online. And in the course of probably 3 months, I went from, making a $5 bet on my local basketball team, the Golden State Warriors, with my friends in a bar socially, to, gambling $200 at 2 a.m. on my phone on like Ukrainian ping pong or some kind of ridiculous sport. And, it was the same experience for me, right? When I gambled on sports with my friends, all of a sudden I felt like one of the guys again. And I felt like I had this common ground and it was something for me to do with my friends. And very, very quickly, I just lost my ability to control it. And unlike my experience with poker, there was no barrier between me and my ability to gamble. Gambling was literally in my pocket 24 hours a day. I would map my days around what sports were being televised. Gambling would be the first thing that I did when I woke up. It would be the last thing that I did before I went to bed. Unfortunately for me, it also coincided with my career in the technology sector taking off. I had a lot of money to put into gambling. And as I lost control of my ability to, gamble or choose what I was gambling on, I started to feel really, really shameful. I started to feel embarrassed. I was working 60 or 70 hours a week at a job and then lighting my money on fire, at night. And this continued for years, probably 7 or 8 years. And as I got, deeper into my addiction, this dissonance really appeared, between the way that I was presenting publicly, right? I would have friends come up to me and say, man, congratulations, you're doing so well, you're so successful. And inside I would just feel like, man, I'm totally fraudulent. I hate myself. I have no money. I'm totally ashamed of what I'm doing, and it's making me really isolated. So, as I started getting to my late 20s, I tried to do something about it, and I decided I was going to stop gambling, and I couldn't. And that was a real kind of alarm bell for me, right? I could string together 2 or 3 days when I didn't gamble, but inevitably I would slip. I would walk back from the train station and stop at the corner store and just buy a scratch off ticket or something stupid for $5 or $10. And the way that I saw it was, oh, I just ruined my sobriety. I just ruined my streak, and day one doesn't start again until tomorrow. So an hour or two later, I'm back online making deposits into a sports book. I'm, sitting at the card table with $1,000 in front of me, in my local card room, and just continued that cycle, probably 50 to 100 times. After doing that for a while and recognizing that I needed more help, I went to therapy. I didn't know that there was such a thing as a certified gambling counselor. So I just found a, a therapist at Psychology Today. And I walked in for the first time and I said, I have this really bad gambling habit. I don't even think I used the word addiction at that point.